Tunisia, March 1943. The desert night was a living, breathing shadow, a darkness so complete it seemed to swallow sound itself, and Oberreiter Hans Weber crouched in his foxhole, rifle resting across his knees, ears straining to catch even the faintest whisper of movement. For 2 years, he had been part of the Afrika Korps, grown accustomed to the desert's nocturnal symphony, the sigh of wind over sand, the distant hum of armored vehicles, the occasional sharp clatter from British patrols. But tonight, the silence was unnatural, almost malevolent. He tightened his grip on his Mauser as his gaze swept the darkness. 30 meters to his left, Corporal Dietrich was posted, tense but confident, a man of experience who had survived countless skirmishes. To his right, Private Kessler, younger and less composed, clutched his rifle like it was a lifeline, eyes wide, every shadow a potential enemy. Then, through the ink-black night, Weber saw them. For silhouettes, moving low and impossible to hear, shadows that seemed to glide over the desert sand, utterly silent. They were small, smaller than any British soldier he had encountered, and yet every movement screamed discipline, purpose, and deadly intent. One passed within 10 meters of his position, and Weber could do nothing but freeze, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed to fire, to shout, to call an alarm, yet an unnameable force held him, pressed him to the sand. These men knew he was there. He was certain. And yet, they had chosen not to kill him, not yet. They vanished into the darkness toward the German lines, leaving a silence heavier than before. 5 minutes later, screams tore through the night. By dawn, Weber had learned 3 truths. Corporal Dietrich was dead, his throat cut with inhuman precision. The small soldiers were called Gurkhas, men from the high, snowbound mountains of Nepal, and the war in North Africa had irrevocably changed. 6 months earlier, German intelligence officers in Tripoli had compiled meticulous reports on Allied forces, cataloguing British infantry as competent but predictable, Australians as aggressive yet prone to frontal assaults, and South Africans as modern, mechanized, and highly effective in open terrain. Then, almost as an afterthought, came the Indian divisions. Dismissive notes described them as colonial troops, likely to falter under sustained combat, uneducated, lacking the endurance and resolve of European soldiers. Feldmarschall Friedrich Müller, reading these reports in his command tent outside Tobruk, nodded with quiet satisfaction. He had fought across Europe and North Africa and believed he knew what constituted a real soldier: tall, disciplined, well-fed, European men who could endure fear, hunger, and death. The idea that small men from Himalayan mountains, many no taller than 160 centimeters, could match German infantry seemed preposterous. Yet, in December 1941, the first confrontation proved these assumptions catastrophically wrong when the 21st Panzer Division probed British positions near Sidi Barry. A German infantry company advancing on what seemed a lightly defended position found themselves facing a battalion of the 7th Gurkha Rifles. They wore British uniforms, yes, but fought with ferocity that defied every expectation. Wounded soldiers continued firing even after their legs were shattered, refusing to yield. The German assault captured the position, but at a staggering cost: 43 casualties to remove 78 defenders. Zimmermann's report concluded tersely, "These are not colonial troops." That line would echo throughout every German assessment of Gurkhas for the rest of the war. The terror for German soldiers was not only in daylight assaults but in the night raids, a tradition refined by Gurkhas over generations since 1815. They moved through darkness as others moved through daylight, carrying the kukri, a curved blade of 18 inches, heavy at the tip, designed to decapitate or strike with terrifying efficiency. Entire German sentries were discovered dead at dawn, victims of silent, precise attacks. Letters intercepted by British intelligence described these men as little devils from the mountains, tiny yet lethal, striking without warning, vanishing like shadows, leaving the German army unnerved. The Wehrmacht's response was to triple sentries, rotate entire squads through nights without sleep, and maintain constant vigilance. Yet the Gurkhas adapted, probing defenses, mapping positions, and exploiting weaknesses. By October 1942, German intelligence formally revised their assessment. Gurkha units, particularly GA battalions, were elite, equivalent in skill to German paratroopers or guards. The Germans, trained to respect strength, were forced to recognize that the fear and respect they felt were justified. The battlefield became a crucible where the Gurkhas' training, culture, and warrior spirit collided with German tactics. At Rusat Ridge in July 1942, the 2nd Battalion, 4th Gurkha Rifles, defended against repeated German attacks for 3 days, fighting to the last man, taking no prisoners. At Medan in March 1943, The 1st Battalion, 9th Gurkha Rifles, conducted a night raid penetrating 300 meters into German lines, killing or wounding over 40, destroying ammunition dumps, and withdrawing without losing a single man. The psychological impact on German soldiers was profound. Darkness, once an ally, became a source of terror. Every shadow might conceal a small figure, kukri in hand, every rustle a prelude to death. The Gurkhas fought with calm precision, a reflection of their culture and training, terrifying to an army that had prided itself on discipline and fearlessness. Heinrich Brandt, commanding a regiment in Tunisia in early 1943, recorded encountering a wounded Gurkha captured in daylight. Barely 22, 5 feet 4 inches, boyish yet composed, shot through the shoulder and losing blood rapidly, he was asked why he fought so fiercely. His reply, through a translator, was simple: "It is better to die than to be a coward." Brandt was shaken, writing in his diary, "This small man has more warrior spirit than half my regiment. We have been fooled. These men are not fighting for the British Empire. They are warriors. Warriors do not surrender." The German soldiers learned, often painfully, that courage, skill, and warrior spirit were not products of race or empire, but of culture, tradition, and rigorous training. As the war moved to Italy in September 1943, the Gurkhas found themselves in terrain that suited them perfectly: mountains, narrow valleys, and fortified positions. German forces, masters of defensive warfare, prepared elaborate positions along the Gustav, Hitler, and Gothic lines, expecting to hold their ground. Yet the Gurkhas, accustomed to Himalayan slopes, moved like shadows over steep, rocky terrain. At Monte Cassino in early 1944, the 1st Battalion, 9th Gurkha Rifles, climbed slopes exposed to machine gun fire, crawling, rushing, advancing cover to cover. Even veteran German officers, hardened by Eastern Front campaigns, whispered in disbelief, "They don't stop. You kill them, and they keep coming." Their attacks were often suicidal in appearance, but success came through unmatched determination and tactical skill. German soldiers, now fully aware of Gurkha capabilities, fortified positions with mines, barbed wire, machine guns, and flares, yet were still forced to respect Gurkha adaptability. Night patrols, small-scale raids, and reconnaissance missions continued relentlessly. A listening post would vanish, a supply route disrupted, an observation point cleared, each operation precise, executed and withdrawn before reinforcements could respond. Psychological strain on the Germans became acute. The kukri, initially dismissed as a primitive weapon, proved devastatingly effective in trenches, bunkers, and close quarters, transforming even fortified positions into deadly arenas. Gurkhas moved through minefields with Bangalore torpedoes, cleared paths under fire, and emerged on top of German positions, reshaping the very understanding of combat for those who faced them. Litver Schmidt, a survivor of the senior river night assault, described them as like ghosts. You hear nothing, see nothing, and suddenly they are among you. Their absence of visible fear unnerved German soldiers trained to endure death for the fatherland. The Gurkhas' fearlessness was rooted not in recklessness but in centuries of warrior culture. Nepal, isolated in the Himalayas, had nurtured an independent martial tradition. Young men were trained from childhood to be soldiers, taught loyalty, discipline, and honor. The Gurkha motto, "Better to die than be a coward," was not an abstraction. It was a code lived in every battle, instilled long before the British began recruitment in 1815, refined over generations into deadly practice. Even as German forces collapsed in Italy by early 1945, exhausted, starving, and facing inevitable defeat, they encountered Gurkhas as guards and administrators in prisoner of war collection points. Hans Weber, wounded yet walking, recognized insignia from the same battalion he had faced in Tunisia years earlier. Havildar Dil Bahadur approached, speaking in broken German, acknowledging the soldiers' bravery. "The war is finished. You fought well. Your soldiers were brave." Weber, recalling the countless nights of terror, nodded silently. These moments revealed Gurkha professionalism in stark contrast to German expectations. They fought without hatred, with loyalty, discipline, and honor. Over 250,000 Gurkhas served in World War II, participating in campaigns across North Africa, Italy, Greece, Burma, and Malaya. They earned 10 Victoria Crosses, more than any Commonwealth unit relative to size, and suffered over 32,000 casualties, including nearly 9,000 killed. German veterans consistently recalled encounters with respect bordering on reverence. Those who began the war confident in racial and cultural superiority were forced, repeatedly, to acknowledge that courage, skill, and warrior spirit were independent of size, race, or nationality. The Gurkhas' presence on the battlefield became a legend among those who faced them, a living reminder that true soldiering is measured in resolve, training, and indomitable will. From Tunisia to Sicily, the Italian peninsula, Monte Cassino, the Rapido River, and the Gothic Line, the Gurkhas repeatedly displayed extraordinary skill and fearlessness. German soldiers learned that no terrain was too steep, no defensive position too fortified, no night too dark to deter these mountain warriors. Each encounter reinforced a growing admiration, a grudging respect that transformed into genuine reverence. Soldiers who had once considered Gurkhas inferior were forced to recognize them as elite, disciplined, fearless, and professional. The narrative of colonial weakness was shattered by the evidence of relentless combat, night raids, and battlefield heroics. Personal stories solidified the legend. Panbagta Garong, in December 1944, single-handedly attacked 5 bunkers, killing all occupants with his kukri and grenades, an act of courage recognized with the Victoria Cross in Burma. Similar actions occurred across campaigns, from Italy to Malaya, where Gurkha units conducted assaults that seemed suicidal yet succeeded through determination, precise execution, and unmatched knowledge of terrain. Every engagement reaffirmed the same lesson. The Gurkhas' skill and courage were cultivated through culture and training, not imposed by empire, yet wielded with devastating effectiveness. German soldiers' experiences reflected a spectrum of fear, admiration, and disbelief. Hans Weber, who had survived Tunisia and the Italian campaigns, wrote in December 1944, "We were told these were inferior soldiers. Every word was a lie. I have fought the Gurkhas for 2 years. They are the finest soldiers I have ever faced. Small, yes, but made of iron. They do not know fear, or if they do not show it. When I see them coming, I know the fighting will be hard. I respect them more than I can say." This acknowledgement, earned in blood and battle, encapsulated the transformation in perception, from dismissive assumption to shock, to grudging respect, to awe. The Gurkhas' legacy extended beyond their physical acts in battle. They demonstrated a code of honor, discipline, and humanity that impressed even the enemies who had been trained to consider themselves superior. German soldiers, raised on ideology and propaganda, learned that the Gurkhas fought not out of hatred but because it was their duty, because it was their tradition, and because they were warriors. Every raid, every assault, every silent approach in the dead of night reinforced the lesson that true warrior spirit is cultivated, earned, and displayed with precision and fearlessness. The war left scars, but it also left recognition. The Gurkhas had shattered assumptions, redefined the concept of elite soldiering, and earned respect in a way no intelligence report could have foretold. By the end of World War II, as German forces surrendered in Italy and elsewhere, Gurkha soldiers continued to perform their duty as guards and administrators with the same professionalism that had made them legendary in combat. Hans Weber, reflecting on the same battalion he first saw in Tunisia, realized that the fear and awe he had felt were not born of cruelty, hatred, or superstition, but of facing soldiers who embodied the purest form of warrior tradition, disciplined, loyal, fearless, and unyielding. The story of the Gurkhas, from the deserts of North Africa to the mountains of Italy, is written in courage, honor, and indomitable spirit, a legacy that demanded respect from allies and enemies alike. In the shadows of countless nights, in the ruins of countless battles, and in the hearts of those who survived to tell the tale, the Gurkhas became giants, not in stature, but in spirit, and the soldiers who faced them, regardless of uniform, could not deny the truth. They were witnessing the finest soldiers of their generation.